Hello, beautiful women, and happy International Women's Day. I'm Annie, writer, writing mentor, broadcaster, and speaker. And it's an honour for me today to mark International Women's Day, where we celebrate women's achievements, resilience, and brilliance. But I would like to talk about something else today. I'd like to talk about what happens when we don't speak, when we don't use our voices. Because every time we choose to remain silent when we actually want to speak, something inside us moves. But it's not just inside us, it's in the entire generation that watches us. And someone is always watching. It might be a daughter or a niece or a work colleague or a student. It might be a little girl in a supermarket queue listening to how her mother responds when someone ignores or talks over her or belittles her in some way that's spoken or just used with hand gestures. Whoever she is, she's watching. I would like to start today by acknowledging that over 160 innocent schoolgirls lost their lives in Iran a week ago, and a mass funeral was held for them earlier this week. Whichever the side of the fence any of us may be on regarding the war in the Middle East, it's really hard not to be on the same page about the loss of so much innocent young life in this and in other attacks around the world that see so many young women and girls robbed of their lives before they even got to realise their potential. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. But I'd like to start the rest of this talk to you today with a question. How many of us can remember a moment when we didn't say the thing we wanted to say? The meeting where we had that idea but let someone else take the floor. The work we did, then stood by not speaking while someone else took the credit for it. The conversation where we felt uncomfortable but didn't want to be difficult, unquote, or challenging. The boundaries we needed to set but didn't feel we had the right or the space. I can remember. I remember when I had words ready to speak, strong and clear and certain, and I swallowed them back down because I didn't want to be too much, too emotional, too ambitious, too opinionated, or just too loud. Isn't it incredible how many ways women are labelled as being too much of something or not enough of something else? We are raised to be agreeable, to be polite, to smooth things over and keep the peace, and to minimise our own achievements and to jump in first with that before someone else does. But silence or self-censure doesn't bring us peace. Often, it keeps us in a state of fear, which we dress up as politeness. We might be afraid of being disliked or judged and possibly even condemned. We might be scared of being wrong and being belittled for it. It's happened enough times, right? The risk of losing someone's love or approval might scare us into silence, and the fear of standing alone and speaking out can stop us from doing it. And those fears are not just in our imagination. Many of us have experienced what happens when we do speak, or when another woman does. The eye roll, the interruption, the dismissal, the wave of the hand by someone to indicate that they'd like to just sweep us aside and have done with it. We've all experienced that. We've all seen it happen to other women. So we learn, don't we? We learn to edit our thoughts and our words. We learn to wait, often without even knowing what for. We learn to stay in the shadows of who we really are. And without meaning to, in a society that treats us as largely irrelevant or unworthy, we start to believe that we are. And we start to feel invisible. And we start to shrink down. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, particularly after I started getting older and realising that ageism and misogyny are still very much alive and well in our society. In the so-called modern Western world where so much discrimination has been officially outlawed, they are the last bastions of prejudice that people can hide behind because they're so hard to prove. But they're out there and they're real, and they are incredibly damaging if we let them be, but only then. And in the course of all that thinking, I learned something that changed everything for me and set me on this path to empower older women to speak. When women silence themselves, they're teaching someone else to do the same. Because kids don't learn from what we say, they learn from what we show. If a little girl watches her mother apologise for having an opinion, she learns that opinions require an apology. If she watches her female teacher defer to every louder voice in the room, she learns that volume is tantamount to authority. If she sees women constantly softening their own boundaries, oh, sorry, but she learns that confidence is conditional. But I would love you to imagine something quite different. Imagine a young girl watching a woman who says, that doesn't work for me, or I don't agree, or I deserve better, or please don't interrupt me, or this is what I think. And saying those things without apology, without over-explaining or quantifying, without shrinking down. That is revolutionary. And we need a revolution because women have been encouraged. No, actually, we've been expected to stay silent for long enough. And the only people who can change that are the women themselves. Nobody is going to rock up and offer us on a plate the right to speak and be fully heard and validated. We have to fight for that. And it's so important that we do. Why? Because when a woman speaks with clarity and courage, she expands the emotional permission to every other woman who can hear her. She becomes a role model for a change that's overdue and desperately needed if we want to avoid yet another generation of women feeling forced to stay quiet. And this is where I want to go a step further. Because our voices don't just shape the present, they shape the future. Out in the world, there's a lot of talk about empowering women and girls. We run programs, we hold workshops, we tell them they can be anything. But if they go home and watch the women in their lives accepting less, staying quiet, biting their lips, over-accommodating and understating themselves, the bigger example wins. They won't remember what was said about the world being their oyster. They'll remember the behaviour that proves that it really isn't. Not yet. And they won't be told that they'll have to fight to be heard when they're older. They'll have to figure that out for themselves, and often at considerable personal cost. That will be the case if we don't empower them now by being the role models they can aspire to be. And we can do that. We are an awesome force of nature who can be the role model younger women and girls can aspire to. And we don't just have to do that by the spoken word. What if we record our stories? What if we write things down? If we tell the truth through the written word about what we put up with, what we survived, what we built, then our courage doesn't disappear with us. And what a terrible loss that would be if it did. As an older woman with wisdom, insight, experience, and a strength born of countless occasions when you needed to be brave, your story is worth telling and hearing. And here's another question for you. How many stories have already been lost? How many grandmothers never told us what they really dreamed of? How many mothers never spoke about the compromises they had to make? How many women carried incredible strength quietly and left no record of that strength? We can leave an inheritance of all kinds of things, can't we? Jewellery, photographs, other meaningful things that matter to us that we thought were valuable enough to pass on. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but imagine a young woman inheriting your voice, your thoughts and ideas, your turning points, your mistakes, your insight, your experience, and your wisdom. That is a far more powerful legacy to offer her. When a woman writes her story, whether it's a full memoir, a collection of memories, letters to her children, or just simply the truth she's never spoken aloud, she does something really powerful. She says, I refuse to disappear quietly. I refuse to let my life be reduced to a handful of anecdotes that may not even be accurately remembered by whoever's telling them. My experience counts, and my voice will outlive me. And here is what I know as a writer and a writing mentor. When women find the courage to tell their stories, something amazing happens. They realize that they were braver than they thought, stronger than they believed, and 1,000,000 times more influential than they ever understood before. It's a powerful, powerful thing. And writing isn't just a legacy for others. It's a way of us reclaiming ourselves, putting our truth in a tangible format, tapping into all of the wonderful things that make us who we are. Because when a woman shapes her story, she stops being just the woman who survived it. She becomes the woman who owns it. And one day, a daughter or a granddaughter or even another young woman who doesn't even know her will read that story and be inspired by it in some way that really matters. Ongoing silence doesn't just shrink us in the moment. It actually erases us over time until there's no evidence at all that we were even here, that we had so much to offer the world. And the world is worse off for that. But we do have enormous power to interrupt that pattern. When we tell our stories, we're doing something radical. We become a bridge across time by saying, I was here. My life mattered. My voice counts. This is what it cost. This is what I learned. And for the next generation of women, that is a legacy more valuable and more powerful than anything else on earth. It has the power to change everything. Imagine in the future a young and impressionable woman opening those papers and reading and feeling the awesome power of a wiser woman's words. And instead of inheriting silence, she'll inherit strength. Instead of guessing what the women before her endured, she'll know. Instead of wondering whether she's alone herself in her own struggles, she'll have the irrefutable evidence that she never was. And that is the power of a woman's written voice. It outlives her and offers real inspiration and strength to the generations to follow. So hopefully they will have the courage to use their voices in ways that keep them visible and valued in society, no matter how old they get to be. Now, let me just acknowledge that the idea of being responsible for more modelling or portraying courage, that might feel a little bit heavy. But I'd like you to take a load off because I don't think it's about being perfect. I believe it's about being honest. It's about saying something, even when your voice shakes. It's about correcting someone when they mispronounce your name, asking for the pay rise, telling your story, admitting when you were afraid or admitting when something hurt you instead of pretending that it didn't. Those things can be said with dignity and grace, but they do need to be said more than they ever have been in the past. And there's no such thing as perfection, and everyone knows that. So take that load off too, and just be real and present. Speak. Because silence doesn't just affect the next generation either. It affects us too. When we swallow our words often enough, they don't disappear. They settle somewhere in our bodies in self-doubt, negative self-talk, and in resentment, and yes, even in anger. All things that fester and take us nowhere good. And over time, we begin to believe the lie that our words don't matter, that we don't matter. And that's a hell of an example to pass on to the next generation. Words have power, and let's consider this. History has never been changed by silent women. Progress has never come from compliance. Fear says, stay quiet. Bravery says, speak anyway. So today, as we mark International Women's Day, I respectfully ask you to declare yourself by speaking at every opportunity you get. When faced with the choice of that, or staying silent when you don't want to be, I'd love you to also consider what you're leaving behind. Because someone young and impressionable is watching you right now, and one day, if she's lucky enough, she may be reading your words. The world doesn't need another generation of women who know better but feel an overriding compulsion to stay quiet. It needs a generation who are brave enough to be heard, and every woman deserves that. So be that role model. Speak your truth and show the next generation of women that they will have better choices. And when you can, write down your life experiences and offer your wisdom through that. Because you are extraordinary. You do deserve to be heard and validated and valued for the incredible resources you have within you that young women need to know more about. Don't settle for shrinking down. Stop softening something that doesn't need to be softened. Forget about who you might offend. The next generation of women matters more than some ageist or misogynistic moron whose opinion shouldn't even matter. And please don't wait for permission. You don't need permission from anywhere to speak your truth, because the permission you might be waiting for is the permission someone else is waiting for from you. Your voice isn't selfish. It is service to your daughter and every other woman who needs you as her role model. I wish I'd grown up with someone who could have modelled that for me. It took me far too long to figure it out on my own. And the young girl watching you, or who one day reads your story, she doesn't need you to be fearless. She just needs you to be brave and honest and real. And in doing that, you allow her to be too. Be brave enough to speak while you're here, and brave enough to write so you'll never be erased. Thank you.